No one was coming to save me. That's what I kept whispering, curled up in the back seat of the car, while the fogged window gave me back my own breath of fear. I, Caterina Azevedo, 26 years old, daughter of no one important and fiancée of a man who turned promises into bars, had a secret map in my pocket and a single plan: run. The new driver slowed at the corner of the old theatre, and in that second when the light turned yellow, I pulled the handle, shoved my body out, and crashed onto the asphalt with my knees burning. Behind me, Vitor Ferraz's voice sliced the street like a knife, promising he'd never lose me, that I was his, that running wasn't my right. I ran without looking back, cheap sandals slapping and humiliation stuck to my heels, and dove through the side door of the Aurora Casino, a burlesque joint tired from the late hour and bored millionaires. I needed a hiding place. I found a stage. The dressing room corridor smelled of hairspray and urgency. A dancer swept past me, body wrapped in sequins, shot me a sideways look, and told me to disappear before someone snapped me in half. I knocked on a door with trembling fingernails, slipped inside without asking, and locked it. The woman at the mirror, red mouth and lined eyes, turned to me and hissed that I was crazy if I thought I could hide there. Outside, Vito's footsteps scratched along the hall. I begged softly, just 5 minutes. She sighed, pulled a robe off the hanger, draped it over my crumpled dress, and pointed to a narrow wardrobe. Stay. But if they catch you, I don't know you. Vito reached the door and pounded like someone certain the world obeys. The woman went over, opened a finger's width of crack, and spoke with sugar-edged steel. Sir, only those who pay get in here. Rules apply, same as life. He growled my name, promised to return, and the hallway swallowed his anger for a few moments. On stage, the MC snapped his fingers, the curtain rose, and the music bit into the night. I breathed inside the wardrobe, heart pounding so loud it sounded like part of the band. When the dancer nudged me and said, "If you really want to disappear, then disappear for real," I didn't understand. But she threw the wardrobe open, shoved a pair of glittering gloves into my hand, and pushed me to the wings. Go on at the end of the song, do anything. Vanish into the crowd. I wanted to say I didn't know how to dance for an audience, only how to dance to survive, but the music pulled me, and before I had time to turn back, I was in the center of the light. The crowd fell silent with that cruel curiosity of the rich. I closed my eyes, remembered the backyard where I'd been a girl and afraid of no one, and let my body speak. No choreography, a moving plea for help. The audience held its breath. On the last note, when the mic came to my mouth, I could have asked for applause. Instead, I sang a line of courage borrowed from my mother, a woman who always told me dignity is a kind of evening gown. The lights burst like stars too close. Someone clapped first, the rest came in waves. Vitor was there a few yards away with the face of a man stabbed by my light, and there was another man, in a dark suit with a presence big as a city block, who didn't take his eyes off me, as if recognizing something he'd lost. Enrique Navarro, whispered two waiters, an heir-turned-executive, a millionaire everyone feared and many desired. He lifted one finger. The manager ran. Numbers changed hands. "I want that woman in a box now," he said with the ease of someone ordering more ice. I left the stage on shaky legs and a thought burning bright. I was not merchandise. The manager intercepted me in the hall, polite smile hiding pressure. Mr. Navarro requests your presence." I answered, outwardly steady. That desire is not an order. The manager clicked his tongue but stepped aside. Behind us, Vitor tried to come. 2 guards contained him with a politeness that hurt. The box felt like another planet, too high for someone who learned to survive at ground level. Enrique stood with hands in pockets, a gaze that pierced and somehow didn't wound. He said my name like testing a spell. "Caterina." I wanted to ask how he knew it, but remembered how many times Vitor had shouted my name through the house, the street, my life. Enrique asked me to sit. I stayed standing. He offered a glass of water, not champagne. I took it out of courtesy but didn't drink. "You dance the truth," he said. "I'm used to fake shows." I replied that I don't dance for men, I dance when I need to breathe. He smiled without showing teeth and said he wasn't buying anything. He was offering 3 things: protection for 1 night, a safe exit through the garage, and silence. My spine wanted to believe. My head, trained to distrust promises, held back. Why? I asked. Because I know what it is to be left at the altar. By love and by luck, he said, voice low like a confession at a wake. And because I saw that man hunting you. In my space, no one hunts anyone. I accepted the exit, but at the door, key to a car that wasn't mine already in hand. He said something that changed the way air went in. I need you for one night at my home, at a dinner. Not as a lover, not as a toy, as presence. There's a ghost that haunts me and I need it to let me go. I laughed, dry. You want me to be another woman's shadow? He nodded without hiding. The woman who was going to marry me left 1 minute before saying yes. Since then, everyone expects me to look whole all the time. I want them to stop staring at the hole. I need them to look at something alive. His honesty stopped me on the step. I could have said no. I said yes, but with my clauses. I choose the clothes, I choose the words, I choose when to leave. He agreed at once, no demands, and added, measuring each syllable, and you won't be touched, not by me, not by anyone. The Navarro house felt like a museum where the artwork remembers. Everything beautiful, everything expensive, everything sad. The housekeeper, Donna Zenaide, greeted me with a relief I didn't understand at first, as if a storm had been postponed. Here, she said, opening a box. Inside a pale dress, simple and perfect, with no scream of sparkle. I refused on the spot, asked for my usual clothes, wanted to walk in wearing my own skin. She didn't insist, but laid a hand on my arm like a blessing. He needs truth, not spectacle. I put on my everyday dress, pinned up my hair, touched a lipstick from the little bag that never left me and went down. Guests arrived with the clatter of hooves from people who tread without looking. Old friends of Henrique and fresh business, women smiling like posing for an invisible magazine, men measuring one another as they measured dividends. When they saw me, some stared like I was too bold for that room, others looked away. Henrique did what he promised. Came to me, asked for my arm with the gentleness of a country gentleman, and announced that I was his fiancée, the woman for whom he had chosen to believe again. A shiver of shock went through the hall. The information moved like fire in dry grass. I froze for a second, and in the same second decided that if I was already on that stage, I'd dance the truth again. I looked at him steady and answered loud enough for the room to hear, "We are each other as company tonight, that's all, and it's already a lot." I invited an older lady to dance, asked one of the senior partners to tell the story of the first project Henrique's father funded, called The Waiters by Name, as I do at any party, and asked the pianist if he knew the samba my mother loved. Small rebellions that rearrange a room. Henrique watched me like a man reading a manual he never had. Vitor showed up, of course, dressed in borrowed elegance, trying to enter as if he still owned me. Security repeated the lesson on boundaries. He spat an insult and was swallowed by the gate. When dinner ended, Henrique took me to the terrace. The city blinked below with its usual courage. I slipped off my shoes, let my feet touch the cool stone and breathed. He leaned on the balustrade at a respectful distance, spoke about the day he was abandoned at the altar, about silence that hardened into armor, about the women he bought afterward, just to make the world believe everything was fine. I spoke about my escape, the controlled phone, friends thinning out, a betrothal turned prison. At some point our eyes recognized each other, two survivors in the same lifeboat. He apologized for the fiancé theater in the hall. I accepted without turning it into easy forgiveness, said I would not be anyone's shadow. He said the ghost was starting to lose its grip. The night could have ended there with a thank you and a driver taking me far away, but fate likes testing us on the same curve. When we came down to say goodbye, the room was less full and more dangerous. Vitor had managed to slip in with two of his, almost discreet. One blocked my way, the other forced my arm with that smile of a man who loves the ground giving way under other people's feet. Henrique went rigid, and for an instant, the lost boy stepped aside for the man the world feared. He took one step forward, said my name, and, to my surprise, asked permission with his eyes. I nodded. He removed the man's hand from my arm with precision, without showboating, and said that in his house no one touches anyone who doesn't want to be touched. That was enough for security to come up, for the fools to back off, for Vitor to promise hells and be escorted out. My body shook afterward. and Henrique didn't lay a hand on me. He just stayed. "I'll take you anywhere you want," he said, and I felt that anywhere had finally returned to being my choice. In the days that followed, life wove itself in a strange, sweet way. I went back to work, straightened out my papers, looked for a little room to restart my community dance classes, called the Aurora dancer to thank her for saving me with that robe, bought a pot of basil because a house that smells of green gives me courage. One afternoon, Henrique showed up with a grocery bag and a head of lettuce with its roots. "They say cooking cures fear," he said without naming fears. We chopped garlic, laughed at the disaster of rice gluing to the pan, and ate standing up like two teenagers inventing a home with borrowed furniture. He talked about contracts like poems. I talked about choreography like maps. And no word asked for a receipt. Still, there's always a moment when the past tries to lie down in your bed again. Henrique's lawyer pressed him about image, suggested I sign a non-disclosure, accept a gift, and fade from the narrative once dust settled. They brought a box. Inside, an old ring from the Navarro family that should have stayed on the finger of the bride who left. I closed the box calmly and handed it back, said I wasn't there to plug anyone's hole. Henrique flushed, not with anger, shame. He dismissed the lawyer, apologized with no excuse. "I'm still unlearning armor," he said, and that's when I knew that if I stayed, it would be for me too. Vitor, meanwhile, slid far from elegance, and what remained was what he had always been. A man who confuses possession with love. He showed up at my building at dawn with promises and threats, spun tales of invented debts, said I owed him years of my life. On the third try, I went to the station myself, filed the report, showed the messages, showed the old bruises I had photographed back when I thought no one would believe me. I learned that reporting isn't a miracle, but it's a stone in the monster's path. He vanished for a few days, resurfaced in another theater, this time pretending humanity, asking for shelter. I gave him bus fare and the number of a support service. Revenge is food for wounded children, I told myself. I was no longer a child. On the eve of Henrique's birthday, Donna Zenaide came to fetch me, said there was a surprise, the kind that scares because it's good. In the garden, a long table with hug-like food, people he loved and had kept at a distance out of shame for being broken. Among the guests was the ex-fiancée, Laura, not as a ghost but as a real person with her own life, holding the hand of the man for whom she'd left. It was strange and right. Henrique looked at me, asked with his eyes that I stand by him, and I did. When someone put on music, I took a breath and danced a piece of my childhood backyard, right there on the lawn, barefoot and laughing loose. Henrique stepped in, awkward and beautiful, tripping over his own gravity, and everyone laughed in that way that heals. If the story ended here, it would already be enough of a victory. But fate, stubborn, likes a coda. The next week, the Aurora invited me for a special night, with proceeds going to a non-profit that protects women. I accepted, on the condition that I choose what and how to dance. Henrique came, sat in the back, not as an owner of anything, but as an audience. Vitor tried to enter and couldn't, because now my no had documents and witnesses. When I went on stage, I wore the same robe that had saved me to remember where I'd come from. I danced without fear, not to seduce anyone, but to throw a rope to whoever was at the bottom of a well. When I finished, Henrique didn't wait backstage or appear with flowers. He stood up in the middle of the crowd, walked to the front of the stage, and without kneeling, without cliché, without theater, asked in a voice like home, "Caterina, may I be your harbor when you want to anchor, and your wind when you want to sail?" I laughed through tears and said yes, 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 but that my boat would always have my name painted on its hull. He promised he'd love the boat that way. The papers called it a fairy tale. It wasn't. It was work, it was choice, it was saying no 100 times and yes only when the soul consented. I didn't become a princess because a rich man snapped his fingers. I became my own owner and, by a pretty coincidence, the man who came close also had money, but more importantly, had the willingness to unlearn and learn again. Henrique didn't save me from anything. At most, he kept the monsters off the porch while I put my house in order from the inside. If someone asked me today what I'd change, I'd say I would have run sooner. But I know legs only run when the head believes the ground exists. My head had to hit bottom to find momentum. Now when the city whispers my name leaning on his last name, I smile. and correct it inside. Caterina Azevedo, owner of her own body, her own yes, her own no. Sometimes I still wake in the dark, and now it isn't fear. It's good silence. I go to the kitchen, smell the basil, look out the window, feel the night cool my hands, and repeat. No one is coming to save me because I don't need saving. I need to be loved in the right measure and respected without discount. And that, thank God, in my stubbornness I have. If you stayed with me this far, thank you. If you know someone trapped in a story that looks like it has no exit, send them this account. It might be the rope they needed. And if you want more stories of love that chooses, courage that starts small and grows, women who are reborn without asking permission, subscribe, ring the bell, and tell me in the comments the moment you realized you deserved more than crumbs. I read everything, answer when I can, and remind you to drink water, eat something good, and say your own name out loud until it fits whole in your mouth. Tomorrow there's another story. Today, dance with me for a minute in the quiet, and when the music ends, trust this. Sometimes the miracle is just us standing.